Ammar and I'm part of the research department here at Markaz. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the primary and much talked about infrastructure sectors in the region, which is power. I'm going to be giving a brief overview of capacity, consumption, and current projects across the region. Over the past several years, the GCC have been making concerted efforts towards enhancing their installed capacity for power generation, and that is mainly due to high growing economies in addition to increasing population growth in the region. Power consumption across the GCC has been growing at an annual rate of about 9% between 2002 and 2009, compounded annually, and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait account for about 75% of that total. Several major power projects across the GCC region have come into effect mainly in 2009, which has had the effect of boosting capacity from about 47,000 megawatts in 2002 to nearly 98,000 megawatts in 2009, which is a near doubling of capacity. 2009 in particular saw a 23% jump in installed capacity as several plants, mainly from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, came online. And currently the GCC operates with a reserve margin of about 19 to 20%. And the bulk of that is in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, which have a reserve margin of 43% and 30% respectively. The expansion in installed capacity in the region has been spurred, like I mentioned before, by the high economic growth in the region and increasing population, which has acted to boost electricity demand. Consumption across the region has grown at an annual clip of about 9% between 2002 and 2009. However, the trend does vary between countries. For example, in Qatar and the UAE, electricity consumption during the period has grown at about 15% each, whereas in Kuwait it's grown at just 6% in the same period. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, given their large sizes, account for about 75% or 3/4 of the consumption in the region, whereas utilization in Kuwait is only at about 12%. Power was one of the first sectors in the GCC to be opened up to the private sector, and Oman in particular has had significant success in regard to PPPs, which are public-private partnerships, and the country has successfully set up about 5 power plants with a combined capacity of around 1,800 megawatts, and has a further 4 additional plants in the works using the IWPP model, which is Independent Water and Power Project, and the combined capacity of those is about 3,500 megawatts. Additionally, the successful implementation of the $2.4 billion Shu'aiba IWPP in Saudi Arabia has also made the power sector more attractive to private investor involvement, basically. In Kuwait, the Slaybia wastewater treatment and reclamation plant was the first large-scale infrastructure project to be carried out by the private sector. And the government has continually been courting private sector involvement in power projects, basically, as evidenced by the Azur North power plant, which is expected to add about 4,800 megawatts of capacity. As of the end of 2010, IPPs have accounted for a combined 20 gigawatts of capacity in the GCC region, and the UAE has been leading the way with IPPs accounting for about 1/3 of the power generated in the Emirates. Abu Dhabi in particular has been the most active advocate for IWPPs in the region and has attracted investments of about $16 billion towards that end in 2010. One of the most important power projects in the region has been the GCC power grid, which is considered a fundamental step towards liberalizing and opening up the power sector across the region to private involvement. Through use of the power grid, the GCC states will be able to import and export power depending on their seasonal fluctuations and needs. Saudi Arabia, given that it has the largest installed capacity in the region, is expected to be a prime player in the grid, and is already studying the prospect of linking it with North Africa and possibly even Europe. As of now, the grid has successfully passed through 2 phases and is now entering its 3rd and final phase, which incorporates the inclusion of Oman. Although this phase, the completion date for it has been pushed back for about 2 years. Despite that, the GCC countries are expected to start selling power to one another beginning this year, although they will be penalized if they don't maintain the minimum emergency reserve required. In terms of current power projects in the GCC, there are currently 360 projects with a combined value of about $277 billion. And the majority of these projects are in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, with about 70% of the total. Additionally, about 1/3 of the projects are currently in the execution phase, and these are mainly in Saudi Arabia as well. However, like with most things in the region, the global slowdown has had a bit of an impact on power projects, with the result that about 11% of them have been cancelled, while 3% have been put on hold. Nevertheless, demand is expected to continue to grow at about 7 to 9% over the coming years, which we think would necessitate an investment of about $45 billion to add 32,000 megawatts of capacity, which would bring the total capacity in the region to about 130,000 megawatts. Thank you and have a good afternoon.